Hey, this is Carl. Before we get started, you should know that there is some cursing, but don't worry. It'll all be f***ing bleeped out. Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And this is the last show we're recording at NDC in the terrarium.
Yeah, in the booth.
We have another one coming up live. That will be next week? Is it?
The week following, yeah.
Okay.
And that's the one we're doing with David Whitney in front of an audience.
Right. And that'll happen next week. And Alayshia Knighten is here, and we're going to be talking to her a bit. But first, let's get started with a little thing we call Better Know a Framework.
Awesome.
All
right, man, what do you got?
I have a game.
A game?
A geography game.
I like geography.
It's called GeoGuessr. GeoGuessr without the last E. So GeoGuessr.com. So this is a game that takes you on a journey around the world and challenges your ability to recognize your surroundings. Basically, it puts you, think of like Google Earth.
Right.
Dropping a pin somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Zooming way in, and now you have to figure out where you are.
You're at the street view.
You're at the street view.
What are you looking at?
Right. And you have to figure out where you are.
Yeah. So there's a landmark you recognize from someplace or something. It's like...
And they start you out easy.
Okay.
Like they start you out, it's the Eiffel Tower. I'm in Paris. Hey, right? But then it's like, it's really challenging.
Yeah. Then it's the 7-Eleven in Croydon.
Right. Yeah. And you really kind of have to look at the language of the street signs and the architecture. You really kind of have to figure it out.
Sort of sniff it out. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like an infinite time sink.
It's a time vampire.
I bet it is. It's like, what have you done to me?
I know. It's terrible. But anyway, you should at least check out the initial stuff. It's kind of fun and probably a good game to play with kids too.
Awesome.
But there's no kids listening to this show because we're swearing too much.
Not anymore.
Who's talking to us, Richard?
Gravity Comment Office Show 1790, the one we did with Chris Klug, who's here at the show.
Yeah.
Back in April of 2022, talking about the various infrastructure as code solutions.
Yeah.
And I did end up in a conversation about instrumentation as well, which I bet we're going to get into today.
Probably.
And this comment comes from Devin Goebel, who said, my hot take on DevOps is that too many practitioners start off with rigid, preconceived notions of what they want to do. This is normal. Our decision-making is always going to be shaped by our scars. I like that line a lot, right? Because goodness knows, the thing that burned you is the thing you don't want to touch again.
Yep.
However, it helps to approach DevOps technology as any technology, that is with an open mind. Start by looking at whether or not out-of-the-box functionality is sufficient, and if not, why? Are the scars running the show? All right, I'm borrowing that line too,
That's
Devin.
a good one.
Good. There's always going to be some amount of custom work that needs to be done. But if our first step is always to start figuring out how to get the pipeline to run a custom bash or PowerShell script, you're probably going down the wrong path. And use the workflow that's in front of you.
Yeah.
Don't presume you have to do it that one way.
Right.
If the canned features can get you most, if not all the way there, then use those. They almost always are going to provide decent error handling, logging, and parameter checking, especially if they're first-party offerings. Keep in mind that there are going to be differences between greenfield and lift and shift that might require some additional work. I like to think about it like any other cloud project. If step one is to create an Azure VM and install SQL Server, you're probably doing it wrong. All right, Devin, we all agree with you.
Yeah.
It's a great point. And, it's always challenging to get things up and running. We start with VMs. We try to do better. And a copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and I read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. I'm at Carl Franklin. He's at Rich Campbell. Send us a tweet. Don't think about it too much. Just fucking send it, okay? Okay, and that brings us to our guest today. Alayshia Knighten is Manager of Onboarding Engineering at Honeycomb with many years of experience in the DevOps realm. Alayshia specializes in enhancing technical and team-related experiences while educating customers on their journey with and beyond observability. In her words, quote, getting shit done while identifying how to accelerate the person beyond the tooling is the real meat and potatoes, end quote. She enjoys solving so how do we solve that problems and meeting people from all walks of life. Her tiny hometown and Southern background inspire Alayshia. In her spare time, she enjoys hiking, grilling, painting, and making random bird calls with her father. Cool.
I do like a good bird call.
And she's the one who told us right away when she came in here that her title is...
Product Training Manager.
No, come on. What goes on your T-shirt? What's that on your T-shirt?
I am the infamous shit talker.
Okay.
What makes you infamous?
Oh, because I can throw it to you real fast.
It's going to come.
Yes.
No matter
yes.
what. So Honeycomb is an instrumentation library? Like how do you describe Honeycomb?
So if you look at it this way, Honeycomb is sort of a observability shop. So most of the times you hear people throwing around observability as this buzzy word that means some arbitrary thing that makes no sense.
Right.
And so it gets muddied in the water a lot. So what we do at Honeycomb is we cultivate observability. So it's a cultural experience. It's experience in mastering your unknown unknowns. Mm-hmm. So the reality is we're all human. We all got shit. And sometimes that shit that happens once every 4 months and we can't pick out that thing.
Yeah.
Or that shit that happens is that we had some contractors, they did a thing, and we really didn't know what they injected into our code until it became really slow.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we looked at some things that we just assume represented this is how it looks great in production. And all the green little colors are there, but you don't know what's happening.
Right.
And so observability solves those things. And the major takeaway for this is that I've been hearing a lot that it's for developers, for SRE. It's for everybody.
Sure.
Because we're all looking at the same shit a different way.
Yeah.
And so it's that same user experience that identifies what resonates with a PM,
right.
that resonates what happens with your directors, developers, whomever.
Yeah, the operations folks, like this is that DevOps story. We're all involved in customer satisfaction, customer delivery, whatever that looks like. And so if you don't get all the pieces right, none of it matters. Everybody's involved in delivering.
Right. I can stand up and say, hi boss, the load balancer was misconfigured or a server went down. Nobody gives a shit. The customer said
the site was slow.
Yes, and that's what it is.
Yeah, and then it failed.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Whatever the problem was. I had the load balancer that always would balance to the machine that fails. That was a good one. So as long as no machine failed, it worked great because it was metriced on speed of response time. Response really fast? Error 500s. Really fast. So it's like one server goes down for one moment, all the traffic goes to it.
They said fail fast and fail often. I'm just taking their advice.
It was really fast. It's like, hey, our average response time's gone down to 3 milliseconds, but it's all error 500. All right.
So let's dig into the meat and potatoes.
Yeah. What does this look like? Like how am I putting code in? Am I adding tools to my site? Like how am I getting more observable?
So for someone that doesn't know what the hell's going on, it starts off with a question.
Yeah.
And so that question would be, hi, we have a service and maybe our service may be the payment service. I'm a payment service and we are responsible for and we care about our users in this way.
Right.
And then from that, you add something into your code. So for example, if it's JavaScript and you're importing some core package, we tell people to use open telemetry. It's open source. It's like, I think, top 2 CNCF standard. Number 1 is Kubernetes. And so the takeaway from that is that we want you to lift and shift. And you should be able to lift and shift. You should be able to go to the product that you think rocks. And we're going to put our money where our mouth is.
Sure.
You come to us and we want to provide that experience and not have you trapped in and locked in. There's different ways to be sticky.
Being good's a good way to be sticky.
Exactly.
Yeah. So OpenTelemetry is an open source library.
You put some code. Yeah, you put some code in. Once you put that code in, you can do what's called auto instrumentation. So to take it a step further, let's say I have JavaScript, I have a Node app. So there's some auto instrumentation that's going to give me some of those core things. Let's say my application lives in AWS. There's some things like that's going to give me that information. Lambda functions is going to give me that. I'm using Express. I'm using this or that. There's some things that happen there. But let's say you're not using a cheat click. So you're not using something that's already there for you. You can manually put a span around it. So at the end of the day, you can have visibility into what you want to see. And my favorite part is you can see it how you want to.
Yeah, no. As soon as you said the span thing, it's like, just pick this piece of the page and mark it up as I want to measure this.
Exactly. If you're sending a bunch of batch things, I mean, you may not want to see all of that. That may not be a representation. Or
isn't that
it may
the
be
usual problem with most of these tools is I turn on the automatic logger and I just get buried.
a bunch of shit.
Yeah, just stuff that's not important.
Yeah, you have to hold your breath. Hold your breath and hope you don't fart. That's how it feels.
I just want to see my shit.
Right.
Would we call these dashboards a show?
Yeah. And so it's having a mindset first.
Right.
It's having the empowerment first. I couldn't tell you how many times I walk up to a developer and they tell me, Alayshia, it's cool that you're here and that's cool. And I'm like, so I guess I should tell you what I do. So what I do, I go and I talk shit.
Right.
But I go and I talk shit with, I call them boots on the ground, with people who actually do the work.
And probably you're talking to them when they're quite frustrated too.
Yeah. Yeah, they walk in, I've had Bleep tool and I have this other tool. And so what makes you different? You know, the tool, like who wants to context switch?
Right.
If I have to, look at exception log this way and then go to the logger over here and then the damn pod crashed. So now where are the logs and all this and that?
Yeah.
That becomes very bearing and it's hard to follow. And what we don't think about is the collaboration piece.
Right.
So I have to troubleshoot this. Most times people hand this off to a team that, quite frankly, they don't really know how the application works. They just put tools in process to make it robust.
Right.
But that doesn't...
That's a great air quote. Robust, right? Oh, I've made it robust. So now we're not going to have any problems.
Yeah. And then when they do have problems, then that's a whole thing. And now the PMs are looking, so what happened? Here's the dashboard. What the fuck is this? What is this? Like, what are we?
See all the green check boxes? We're fine.
That's good. Green good, right?
Right. And then you have your VP looking around as if, okay, so the dollars don't make any sense.
Yeah.
Well, because it's all a shit show. And so this is about stringing these pieces along. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and actually getting a view into what the real problems are.
Right. Because at the end of the day, to be honest, you're going to fix a bug. If you're a good engineer or a good team, is the bug going to come again? No. So why is it in a dashboard? Right.
Yeah. Why are you measuring it now that you fixed it?
Right.
If you fixed it.
Right. If you fix it.
This is always the battle, right? Is it code or is it the infrastructure implementation? Did we just, stick it in the wrong cloud configuration? Like there's so many possible problems there.
And the beautiful thing about that is you could put observability around everything.
Around all the things.
Yeah.
What I really want isn't a dashboard that's got a bunch of graphs and numbers and stuff. What I want is the dashboard to tell me, hey, this is failing, or this is not healthy, or this piece right here needs more resources or something, right? Some sort of prescriptive thing in English so that anybody who can just look at it, read it, and figure out what's going on.
I'll give you one better. I feel sometimes that companies like to make decisions for you when you buy their tool. They like to think that you should only be looking at this. What if I tell you you should be looking at what you've deemed as a problem? Sometimes errors for some people are not errors for other people.
True.
When we look at error codes for some people, I want to look at 500s. For other people, 404s is a thing.
Yep.
It just depends.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's what you've identified as an issue. It's not this prescriptive thing that people have said, okay, this is where we are.
Right.
And then you get stuck in that too. So, as a good engineer, over time, my latency is going to get better. Over time, availability is going to get better. Why am I still stuck on the thing that I created 2 months ago? I should be growing with that. I should be asking questions about that. I should even be empowering new engineers. They shouldn't feel that Joe is hogging all the work, or Joe is hogging, or I have to go to Joe. They should be able to.
Yeah, the answers are only there.
Right. They should be able to organically ask the same question, or actually look into the question that you ask, because that's cool too.
Different people have different problems, right? They're saying the site's too slow, the site crashes sometimes.
Right. Right. Are you blaming this service and it's really that service?
Yeah.
How do we see that?
Well, just getting everybody on the same side of the problem too, right? Like I've certainly had that experience where it's like, hey, the code ran great on my machine, man. I don't know why your infrastructure can't run it.
Exactly. And that's the worst thing. Or, in our CI pipeline. We've done all this integration test.
Right.
That's not production, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You know what? The customer will always exceed your ability to test.
Right. And
Definitely.
so, yeah. And so with observability, you can test in production. And that's
Right.
kind of where you want to be. And you want to be able to test fast too.
Yeah.
Well, and also, and you're testing against the truth then. It's just
Yeah.
a question of how much impact that test has on the outcomes.
Right. And the other takeaway is there is an iteration process.
Right.
So you're not going to get this thing right all the time.
Mm.
You're going to iterate over that. So it's a new way of thinking.
Well, and it's a moving target. Like if your
Right.
site's being successful, the traffic's going up and
Right.
behavior's going to change.
Right. And so you start off with a hypothesis, right?
Mhm.
So if you look at, for example, an SLO. So without getting all technical about an SLO, it's really a business negotiation.
It's a
expressed
service
in-
level agreement.
Yeah, it expressed in technical terms.
Right.
And so the business is going to tell you, hi, I want this thing to move fast. And the technical people are going to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, we're going to pick a number out of the sky.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm going to be the non-cursing one today, apparently. But we're going to, because you can pick it out of all sorts of places
Yeah.
about how fast that API is going to respond consistently.
And I can do you one better. If you have a pretty great observability tool, it'll tell you.
Right.
It'll
It'll tell you what your current responses are.
Yeah. And so you can understand how you can move from there. And then
Yeah.
you can use your SLO to guide you. If you're still sitting with the same percentage, 6 months later, you're not doing something right.
Yeah, you're measuring the wrong thing. That number should have changed.
That number should have changed
Yeah.
and you should not be stagnant.
Yeah. No, there's no way you stay consistent in all that if you're measuring things that matter.
Exactly. And you're doing yourself a disservice if you're saying you haven't grown.
Yeah. No, because stuff's going to evolve inevitably. Like, we want to see that. Like, that's what's going to give us confidence.
Right. Because at the end of the day, if you've rolled out 65 changes, they did not affect
And they
anything
didn't
in a
move the
positive
number.
way.
Like,
Yeah,
are we working on the right things? Or are
Exactly.
we just measuring the wrong thing?
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really powerful. And then, by that point, then it's like, why do you build anything if you don't have at least a theory of what the impact's going to be on the SLA?
Right. Everything's an experiment.
Yeah.
Everything is literally experiment. You're going to get together. You're going to figure out the core purpose
Mhm.
and everyone's going to look at that data differently. And if you teach them how to look at that data, so if I teach my PM how to look at that data,
Mhm.
then they'll be able to tell me something a little bit better than what they were telling me before. And I can translate back and we can have that negotiation or that discussion.
Well, I just can't imagine that you've written the right agreement in the first place.
Right.
Right? I mean, if it's a bespoke service you're building for a customer and you had, before you could even start on it, you had to write an agreement about how it's going to perform, you made up some lies to get there.
I literally have on a sweatshirt says that the nines don't matter if your users are not happy.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, that's what it is. Imagine having an SLO at 70%.
Yeah.
Most people will tell you they may throw up.
Yeah.
But
It's
I can
disastrous.
but I can challenge that to say, what if it was at 70% and your users were happy?
Yeah.
And there is no impact, and
Very-
you measure that appropriately. What does that really mean?
And the vice versa is also true.
Right.
We're compliant with the SLA and the customers are unhappy.
Right.
And your answer cannot be, we are compliant with the SLA. Enjoy.
That's bullshit.
Yeah.
You're not getting the
That's
check.
what that is. Yeah.
You're not getting the check.
Yeah.
You're just not
It's
getting the
not
check.
good enough. You
Yeah.
measured the wrong thing. So it's really, really interesting to think in terms of, now that I have this observability, I start to be able to measure things meaningfully. It's like, let's go back and put a factor in play, redo this contract to say, here's a number that's going to creep up with features over time because you want those features. And then we're going to know when we need to put effort to improve that or adjust the expectation.
Right. And leaning into that, then you can translate that to all the other practices that you use.
Sure, yeah.
And so you can use observability to refactor how you start going about your SLAs.
It does feel like this is how we figure out when to work on technical debt.
Right.
When we
Right.
know it's going to impact the customer if we don't.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And if you're doing observability right, then you can figure out where your burn is. Because if you're sitting there and you said your threshold was at 99%
Mm-hmm.
and you're lower than that, and there's an incident and you went to shit, well, now you know you cannot do chaos experiments. You know, Joe should not be spending his time doing this. He really should be spending his time doing that.
Yeah. We're working on the things that we actually agreed that had to
Right.
work
And
a
then-
certain way.
Right. And then you can do product-led growth much easier.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, you know what to work on.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about how much of the time a team is working on what they feel like working on, like whatever's cool versus what actually is going to satisfy customers.
Right. And it's cringy to think that at the end of the day, there's all of these great people in the business that have different roles. You have a CS group, you have a sales group, you have an engineering group that has PMs, product people, blah, blah, blah. And because they're not all speaking the same language and they're not leading by the product and trying to figure out from that discovery of the customer to when they either sign up for something or whatever that is, all the way to the life of the customer. When those things get muddy and you're not understanding what the data looks like, then you start breaking up what it should look like.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it a mistake that you're not speaking the same language? Like, we either all succeed or none of us succeed. You're delivering on the customer. Everybody should have that same metric.
Right. And everyone from technical to non-technical should be able to tell you what your mission is.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's the classic NASA going to the moon thing, right? Where the president asks the janitor, "What is it you do here?" And he says, "I'm helping people go to the moon."
Right.
Like, that's actually the job. The fact that he swept floors is irrelevant. That's what that was his role in making sure people got to the moon. And I think that common metric is important. And then just acknowledging that each group has contributions that can lead to that metric.
Right.
Whatever that piece may be. Isn't this all the DevOps mantra, ultimately? The healthy one. There's plenty of unhealthy DevOps mantras.
Okay, you said healthy, right? Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
And we didn't bleep it. I don't know why.
Yeah. And if you look at it this way, I like to think of it as it's humans being humans.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't care what AI is out there or whatever people put together. At the end of the day, we all have questions and we all grow from questions and we all evolve from questions. And as a group, as a tribe, we come together as a community to create something magical.
Yeah.
And that's what happens.
And so, good observability so that everybody gets to cross the finish line. Yeah. Like we all delivered well. Although, I mean, it's reasonable to have metrics for each of those teams too, that their portion was contributed well to the overall goal. Yeah.
And so I'm not saying in observability, there's the pillars, right? Tracing, logging, and metrics. And so you can do as you please with those. And if we go back to that whole payments example, I'm a store, and so I'm a part of that. I don't give a fuck about everybody else's service. I really care about mine.
Mine is what matters. This is what I'm paying for.
Right, and I can put observability around that because I know exactly what the user needs for that portion. And Joe and Armand and Sally can do that for their portions.
Right.
And we can all come together to watch those magical things happen. And so there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, keep that customer happy in that way.
Hey, should we take a break?
Sure.
All right, let's take a break, and we'll pause for these important messages, and we'll be right back. Hey, it's Carl and Richard here. We're here with our friend JD Trask from Raygun.
Hey, JD.
Howdy.
We thought we'd just talk to you for a second about how Raygun got started. How did the whole thing come together?
It wasn't our first product. We actually built a range of different tech companies prior to launching Raygun. And we built Raygun off the back of how Jeremy and I, the JB of the JB duo, had been monitoring our software previously, where we would email ourselves if there was a fault. And we wanted to build a full system around that.
Who would do that? I guess I have.
It's a nightmare going all into your inbox. So that was the inspiration.
Yeah.
That's a great story. And it's a great product. Thanks for making it.
Oh, no, it's our pleasure. I honestly think, if I was building a business today, putting something like that in from the get-go, we see customers where they adopt that sort of technology early and the number of issues they have sort of stays very, very low, from the get-go. It's really impressive when you see really large companies that are actually not sending very many errors because they've taken that quality so seriously from the beginning, as well as helping larger companies sort of, bring those numbers down and lower the number of faults. It's really cool to see.
Well, we use Raygun at .NETRocks.com, and it does its job. It tells us when there are errors, but we haven't really fixed them yet. So
we do have a permanently ignore function for you there, Carl.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. Well, thanks. Let's do this again.
Thank you.
All right. And if you'd like to know more about Raygun, go to raygun.com and try out a free trial.
And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
I'm Richard Campbell.
And Alayshia is here, and we're talking about observability. And it's really fascinating that we're getting into the weeds now of I can imagine that, it does take balls of steel to work in this realm, especially when you have to point out that, some people are wasting time, and the metrics don't lie, it's like, okay, well, you're using the wrong tool here. You measured the wrong thing here. And I mean, how, have you ever had enough pushback where you're just like, fuck it, I'm out of here?
Well, I like to get paid, and I like to get paid on time.
Yeah.
So I do have pushback in terms of, so what makes you different? And quite frankly, every time I talk to someone, the look on their face is like, this cannot be true. Until we start doing it. And it's like, wait, this is true. And this does make sense. And so when I do get pushback, it's easy just to touch that human element to say, I understand. This is another tool, and let me show you your possibilities, and let me show you that you own it.
Yeah, right.
We don't own it. You own it.
And how to make it better, how to make yourself better.
And so you can, in that trace in itself, every span you send, so every event with a duration, you can put all of the data that you actually need to represent that thing, whatever that is.
Yeah. So you can get in as deep as you need to. Exactly.
And then as incidents happen and you resolve them, maybe you're thinking of something else. I work with a lot of distributed teams. Half of them talk shit about each other behind their backs.
Yeah. Only half?
I mean, it's a little bit more than that. Half of them throw up middle fingers at each other.
Yeah.
And it's simply because the collaboration piece is so hard because there's no insights, and everyone thinks the thing that they're doing is the right way.
Yeah.
Using open telemetry puts a standard on what that looks like.
A good exercise might be to take all your team and throw them on a line as cooks in a restaurant.
Oh, I love taking them out of their element. That's a great one.
Yeah, and then that's a really good example. If you watch a well-oiled team in the kitchen working together, it's hard, first of all, to get to that place. But when we did that strange loop with soup kitchens. We go volunteer at a soup kitchen. Yeah.
You learn a lot about people in a big hurry.
You do. Yeah. Because especially everybody's in crisis all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And their crisis is most important. So they're not paying attention to what's coming down the line, and then they get distracted, and then you're in the weeds.
And in an ideal situation, this is ideal. Does it happen? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. In an ideal situation, let's just say we're a group of engineers and we're responsible for different aspects of the product. It would be cool if we all knew what each other did, and we rotated on teams to understand, to collaborate that way.
It's certainly a work I've done over the years. My goal whenever we mix those two teams together to do a review or something is for everybody to come out of the room going, wow, your job's hard.
Yeah.
Right. Just some respect for how hard each piece of the overall customer delivery problem
But
is.
at the same time, you want to be productive. So you can't take people who are unqualified for a position and throw them in, to the sharks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's tough balancing act.
So, at Honeycomb, you can, if you want to, you can do like on-call rotations.
Yeah.
So we use Honeycomb to Honeycomb. So we monitor our Honeycomb to our customers internally. And so for me, that was an absolute blessing and a shit show. So first of all, I'm not a developer. I say that millions of times.
Yep.
That's not my thing. And so I had to understand what made all these teams work. And the great part about it was that we use Honeycomb to Honeycomb.
Right.
So I was able to see the SLOs to see what we're driving.
Yeah. Where are we running
to be alerted?
So for these people who don't understand what that term honeycomb actually is, why don't you define it for us?
Honeycomb, like
honeycombing.
Honeycombing. So honeycombing is just something I just made up. So honeycombing for me is, like I was saying, we use Honeycomb to monitor our systems.
Right.
And so honeycombing is just diving in using observability the honeycomb way.
I got you.
And typically from open telemetry data.
Right.
Are there other sources?
Yeah. So let's say I'm using open telemetry. And so open telemetry, as of right now, please don't quote me. Now they have a logging API, so you can send that.
Right.
I know you can do that for .NET, and there's some other ones that are supposed to GA at some point. Let's say I have a trace, and that trace is going to tell the user story, right?
Right.
So
the path that user took through the system.
Right. But that's only going to tell me something like, okay, there is an error. These things happen. But what if it was my underlying systems?
Right.
And what if I do need to send some metrics
Mm-hmm.
and overlay that to understand that, okay, this may have been a CPU or a memory leak or
Right.
shit, my pod restarted or whatever it was.
Yeah.
You can send metrics, you can send logs, and you can send tracing.
But you're talking about the classic battle here of was the code incorrect, and so that's why it failed, or was the infrastructure it was running on unable to run it effectively?
Right. And you started off with a question.
Right.
It wasn't I know, or let's look here. Your source of truth is really your question.
Yeah.
And then that's doing a core analysis where you identify the problem and then you refactor.
Well,
and then you go do it again.
The biggest thing I get from a tool like Honeycomb is that we're all sitting on the same side of the table, looking at the projected screen going, so what are we seeing here? You're no longer pointing fingers at this is an infrastructure problem. This is a code problem. We're looking at the analysis and we're blaming Honeycomb for all our problems.
Normally when I'm in a room and we have this thing where it's sort of a fire drill.
Yeah.
Where I go in with a customer and I challenge them to get some data in.
Yeah.
And for the very savvy ones, they would have already discovered an incident.
Yeah.
And for those who had not, we'll just go through and look at that data and I'll find something interesting. I don't know what the hell's going on with their code. I'll find something interesting and a guy tells me he has to leave because he has to go fix that.
Right. He's just seen something he didn't realize has been going on.
Because it's your stuff, it's your ownership. And so by visualizing what's going on, you can interpret, oh, shit, I got it.
You knew that might have been happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Or we've delivered this thing and, it's blowing up. That happens a lot.
That's not how that was going to be used.
Right. And now your business, your biggest customer is affected and you also get to see that.
Right. You're seeing that.
Yeah. Or on the flip side, now you get to see that your biggest customer, or even not your biggest customer is utilizing your software. And so what you can do if you have a CS team or a sales team, that's impact to get you more money.
Yeah.
You can then say, hey, I see you utilizing, are you underutilizing the software? You can put metrics around that to identify what to do next as well.
And it's like we see this department in your company is using this just fine, but I thought your other guys were going to use it too. Like there's a training opportunity there.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's pretty powerful. Well, and it is a great part of this is not just chasing bugs, but you looking at customer utilization, how people are using the software and saying, is this workflow right?
Right.
Like,
imagine making your PMs better. Imagine a place where I talk to a customer and they are using various things to deploy. Different types of tools because a lot of people believe that you can use whatever tool you want and that's your business. It becomes very muddy if there's not a generic practice, if that makes any sense. Like use what tools you want, but there has to be a level of a framework or it'd be chaotic.
A consistent practice.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when that happens, maybe you want to know, we need to save on money. And so let's just put it in there, a field to identify what you're using to deploy.
Right.
And based on that, which one is doing the best? Which one is being utilized? I can then use that to say, I can negotiate to say, you can't take this away from me.
Yeah.
Everybody's using it. Why the hell are we paying for this? Nobody's used this.
Not paying this, but not using this one.
This
or
is
every
why
time
the bill's
we use
slow.
this one, we roll back.
Exactly.
Like every time. You know, those employees where we don't roll back, other tool.
Right. Or the pipeline keeps saying that it's passed, but based on this thing keeps happening.
The customer is not going to be happy.
Right. Or internally, your developers are screaming at the SRE team because something is going on that shouldn't be going on. And now they can see that.
Yeah.
And so it's not we hand off. You can hand off something to someone, but you still need to have visibility.
Sure.
Everyone
I think
needs to have
that's the
ownership.
thing I'm seeing from Honeycomb is like, everybody should be looking at this. I'm looking down at the call level. Like I can see my code being run here. So why would I ignore operations when it's my code being run?
Right. Because the user runs the show.
Yeah. In the end, we have a common metric. Customer satisfaction,
exactly.
Making the sale successfully. That's the piece I think people often, it's the best part I ever took out of DevOps was just like, hey, we are all actually in the same business of providing value to customers.
Right.
Don't think you're in a little fiefdom.
Yeah.
And nobody succeeds unless all of us succeed.
Exactly.
So as long as the tool helps me with that, I think that's often a problem is right. Ops guys have got their own instrumentation. They're worried about ops things. Dev guys really don't have instrumentation. They have tests that pass sometimes, and then they move on from there. And the PMs are taking the loudest noise and making it into new features rather than looking at how the software is being used and saying, is this a workflow we should improve?
Exactly. Or we have a Terraform provider.
Oh, yeah.
And so we have insights to understand who's on what versions, because not everyone's going to always go to the latest.
No.
That happens. That's totally reasonable. No, whatever is identified as stable.
Far more normal than what Apple tries to do.
Did I mention I had to buy a new laptop?
And because of that, we're able to be proactive on maybe we saw a bug or a new feature has came out that makes your life much better.
Right.
Now I can tell all of these users who have not promoted themselves to that, hey, this is what's going on. And I can be proactive. And that helps the business side. So that helps the non-technical person identify those things.
It helps the sales side. Right?
Yeah.
Like I can give language to salespeople. Like I know this customer is using the software this way. And if they could see these other features, they would get a bigger benefit from it.
Exactly.
Right? That opportunity to targeted persuasion for sales, like you're going to save them a lot of time and get some good results.
And it's a lot in it for you. So what if I was working on that? Now I get to see, I came out with some new features and people are using this shit. Yes.
That was one of my favorite things back in my PM days was watching the logs after we deployed a feature, say who's using it, who's not, and how are they using it. And my goodness, we did this wrong. Like, or just before the system tips over, watching the impact of the new feature on the system. But writing that post like a week or two into the utilization, I'd write up a study and just go, hey, we roll out this feature. Here's where we're seeing it turn up. Here's what they're doing with it. Like win, or we better fix this right now because it's going to tip us over.
So without naming names, can you tell us some of the bigger shows that you've walked into?
Yeah. Without naming names.
Right.
I've been in situations where we didn't speak the same language.
Literally,
but I didn't really disclose to them that I kind of knew because I didn't want to have to say words and I didn't know what the hell I was saying.
Right.
And so I watched them talk about each other. And I watched them say, we need to take this offline because this is getting heated. I've watched a lot of the tech is easy.
It's always the people.
It's the people.
Yeah.
So really, you're a marriage counselor.
Yeah, I like to consider myself like a Oprah, Dr. Phil of Observability or something like that.
Well, okay, but not Dr. Oz?
Maybe, but I don't want you to have the expectation that I'm gonna walk away, or you're gonna walk away from here and it's all kumbaya.
No,
because you're probably still gonna hate this person. You're gonna hate them less.
Yeah, but at least value the differences too, right? All of those things are advantageous, and also nobody hires you for therapy. It's way easier to hire you for a tool. Right.
Yep.
Help us with this tool.
You know what's funny? People do hire me for therapy. They just don't say it.
No, they never
I'm never going to say it.
They ask it, but that's actually what they need.
Yeah. They, the common things that I get are that we've used 1 million tools.
Right.
And no one has adopted this thing.
Right.
We just need help. We have holes in our processes.
Right.
We financially take hits because we don't know the impact.
Yeah. Well, and buying a tool isn't going to make you all feel better.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Although,
right.
I mean, again, that common view moment where every different team can see something meaningful in the data set, it's a pretty powerful capability.
Right. And you can help out your fellow colleagues. So support is not going to probably use an observability tool as often, but they need starting points.
Right.
And so you can give them those starting points to say, for this service, this is the critical things for this service.
Right. Mm-hmm. This is what's going to make the difference for them the most.
Right.
Yeah. And it's always a question of that low-hanging fruit. I also like when you do this well, people offer to take work items. Like sometimes this is better served by an infrastructure change than a code change and vice versa.
Right.
It's
and people get excited.
Yeah. Well, you get them on the same side of the problem, right? Instead of being adversarial.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Sometimes I think the tools make a huge difference if they can give us visibility and help us to be better collaborators.
And people know how to use them and use them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and trust them too. I've often seen people attack the metrics. That can't be correct.
Right.
Right. And also being able to think on your own. It's a really good one. Being able to have confidence to say in an incident, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And for all of the technical people involved to understand what happened. It's very
buy
powerful.
into that root cause analysis.
Right. And to be able to go back and look at that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things is simply that with anything that you run and that query builder, there's a permalink. So that thing that you ran, you can drop it and share it with your friends.
Right. Always go back to it.
Right. And you can put it in an incident. So 5 years later, that cache data lives there.
Right.
And if you want to rerun it, you can.
Yeah.
Or you can just look at that data. That way, that's a great point for people to identify what happened if they didn't participate.
Yeah.
Or want to know what happened. Imagine your PM, they don't know what the hell happened.
They missed all of that. They weren't working that Saturday.
Yeah.
In fact, they're never working any Saturday. How interesting.
Right. And they can go back to that.
Yeah. I always liked having like a Slack channel for that whole process. And then when you went back through it and saw how much time we spent in analytics before you saw that aha moment in the chat where it's like we thought we looked over here, we looked over there, we tried a little of this, we're arguing over numbers and somebody says, well, what about this? And then it's like suddenly we have a picture of what's going on.
Exactly.
And the fix is small. Like the recovery was pretty quick. The diagnostic was the whole time. Right. That's the whole effort. And the longer you spent finger pointing, the longer it took to get to that moment. It is a remarkable study in people all along, but nobody will hire you as a marriage counselor.
Right.
Just got to bring out the tools. I really enjoy this. I think that Honeycomb is a cool tool in terms of just being kind of agnostic around all the different aspects you need to poke at to understand what's going on inside a given service.
I agree. It's the freedom.
Yeah. It's not any one thing. It's all these different things together. So you can try and build a common view up. How do you suppress the noise? Like there's always an awful lot of stuff coming up that's not that important.
We don't make noise.
Yeah. And
so you send your data, but we don't, that's what I'm saying. You have the freedom to do whatever you want. So by default, you don't set alerts.
Right.
That's up to you.
Okay.
In an ideal state, you want to have a service level objective that can alert you because now you're basing this off of customer happiness and success. And you can do that if you want to.
Yeah.
And so everything is data driven because it's production data. And so you set that on your own. So that's how you eliminate the noise. You decide what it needs to be and how it needs to be.
Yeah.
From triggers to SLOs to whatever.
Yeah. What actually the dimensions are.
Yeah.
On that.
So, yeah.
It also feels like I can snap all this on and just take a baseline. Have said this is what normal and healthy looks like.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, exactly. You can create that baseline, and then from that baseline, you can start making those decisions. Yeah. And as you roll out and have changes, you're going to grow.
Yeah.
And you refactor those decisions.
Yeah, and see how the numbers are changing over time. Like, I like the idea of predicting when we're going to exceed the limits of what we've agreed to. Because we have a growth rate of 1% on this. We've got 6 more months before we're going to be in violation. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
Right.
I also like the idea of not waiting till the customer's calling to say, oh, hey, we've got a problem here. But,
well, yeah, you do have a problem if the customers are calling you.
Yeah. But I've also seen lots of folks who's like, I'm not going to put any time into fixing this till the customers are calling. So I've also done the work that says the customer will begin calling in 3 weeks. Because I can see your numbers degrading here. So I expect you'll start getting calls then.
All they got to do is look at the shit board.
Yeah. So are we calling this poop calling or shit calling?
I guess, it's up to you, really. At this point, we've cursed so much. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Certain number of folks that are going to be unhappy, but
who cares?
I think most people
them.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, yeah.
All right.
I do think that's a power that I liked, especially as sort of a senior person. It's like, don't tell me when we've tipped over. Tell me when we're going to tip over.
Right.
Right. That we know there's a line. Like it puts some pressure on what's our planning to not cross that line.
Right.
Rather than wait till we cross it.
And I like the piece where I can go in and be confident when I do talk to leadership and when I do talk to business about what's going on and what's impacting.
Yeah. But also just reminding them, it's like these systems aren't static. They are evolving. They're going to need maintenance because we are making money. Like we're having success. It comes at a price.
Right. And normally at Honeycomb, we use that budget burn down, because we calculate all that for you and show you what that looks like.
Yeah.
Hey, my air budget has depleted. I can't go do this shit.
Yeah. So you can't keep going. But also that you can justify when we spent this money,
right?
To do, not a new feature, but to do some of that tech debt, reduce that time, do some performance tuning. We added X many more months on.
Exactly.
Like we're good for another 6 months. We don't have to worry about that. Time well spent.
Right.
Right. That's always been the problem, right? I did lots of performance tuning over the years. The problem is that nobody cared. Right. When it was broken, they care. But once it was fixed, it's like once there's air in the room, nobody cares about air.
That's
they
right.
care when there's no air in the room, but they don't care once there is air.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just like creating 9 million tests.
Yeah. I remember a PM telling me once we'd finished the optimization, like a month later, we were talking about how great that was. He says, that wasn't a great time. You shipped no feature then. Right? You mean that sprint where you shipped no features? You're like, yeah.
Yeah. Because their report is different than your report.
Yeah. And their measure is always the next feature out the door. And so the fact that we worked on those other problems.
Right. But if they had the data to understand, then they would be like,
you know what? Performance is a feature.
Performification is a feature. So, what's next for you? What's in your inbox, Alayshia?
Define inbox.
What's on your to-do list?
Where do you go from here?
Yeah, what are you doing after the show?
After this show? So, after this show, I have a talk on Friday.
Nice.
So I'm going to do that cool thing where I talk about observability, progressive delivery, feature flagging, CI/CD pipelines, putting observability on every damn thing for everybody. And so I have that. Outside of that, the next thing I'm excited about, as weird as this sounds, when I go home.
Yeah, I like home.
I'm going to go and grill a few pieces of meat. And that's what I'm excited about.
Good. I'll be right over. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's like I said, this tech stuff is easy. So outside of the tech stuff, I like to go and cook and grill and nature as I get older, depending on what we're talking about. I move too slow. I get sweaty or there's bugs. I'm confused, but grilling allows me to be therapeutic about being outside.
Yeah, and the smoke keeps the flies away.
Exactly.
Yeah, it certainly does.
Keeps the flies away, keeps your neighbors jealous.
Yeah.
Keeps your house fed.
But my neighbors have learned if you smell hickory, you should come over.
That's right, because you're typically not just making enough for you.
Yeah, it's like, listen, brisket comes in only roughly one size, too big.
Yeah,
so
too big.
Come and help me.
Well, Alayshia, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, and thank you very much for enlightening us.
Thank you. This has been great.
All right, we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a